Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. If this is your first time here, my name is Jody, I love watches and I would love it if you would subscribe to the channel by hitting the big button that says subscribe on it. Welcome today to another head-to-head comparison video, and we're definitely a little more upmarket today because all three watches on the table are from Tudor. Tudor have made enormous inroads in the luxury watch market over the last decade, now sitting comfortably within the top 10 luxury brands by sales, mostly thanks to the Black Bay and Pelagos ranges, and I've got one of each on the table today. I've got a Black Bay 58, a Pelagos 39, and also a Ranger in for review. Now, the Ranger may seem like a bit of an outlier in this company because it's not a dive watch, but believe me, all three watches have a lot in common with each other. Now, there have been plenty of comparisons between the 58 and the 39, but nobody has ever thrown a Ranger into the mix as well. Until now, that is. Now, these watches don't all belong to me, unfortunately, but one of them does. As you may know, I bought a second-hand 58 last year. It was a long-term grail watch of mine, and a bit of a treat to myself for finishing university. The other two are kindly on loan to the channel by my good friend Mr. P. He managed to snag a Pelagos 39 last year when they were really hard to come by. They're still pretty hard to come by, and when he was offered a Ranger by the same AD a couple of months later, he went for it as well. So, three gorgeous watches then, all with pros, all with cons though. Which one would you choose if you had to pick one of the three? Leave me a comment, let me know. Am I going to end this review with a sinking feeling that I bought the wrong watch? Let's flip the camera and find out. Let's start with the group photo then and briefly discuss some of the similarities, but also some of the differences between these three Tudor watches. Of course, they are all from the same brand, that's pretty obvious. They're all 39mm in diameter, they all contain the same movement, more or less, so we won't dwell on that today. However, they are not the same. Two of them are stainless steel, one of them is titanium. Two of them are dive watches, one of them is a sports watch, two of them have snowflake hands, one of them does not. Two of them are retro reissues, one of them is not. And note the order that I have them displayed here. Ranger on the left, Pelagos 39 on the right, Black Bay 58 in the middle. That is quite deliberate. I'll circle back as to why I laid them out this way at the end of the video. One thing they all have in common is the same packaging, but they don't all have dents in it. This is my box and it got a bash a while ago, unfortunately. This one's going nowhere though, so I don't really care. Each watch comes with a 4-year warranty, fully transferable if you are a flipper, however. Another thing they have in common is a rather boring caseback. The Pelagos is made of titanium, the others are made of steel, but they all look like this, so we need not concern ourselves with it for too much longer. But while we're here, we should talk about the caliber they all share. Well, in truth, the 39 features this MT5400, whereas the other two feature an identically spec'd but slightly smaller 5402. Both movements have 27 joules, a 70-hour power reserve, a silicone hairspring, are cost certified, and feature a beat rate of 28.8, i.e. 4 Hz. Can't really complain about any of those specs. Let's talk money then, Aussie dollars today, and it's interesting. There are $1,000 gaps between the three models. Perhaps that will have a bearing on which one you pick. The Pelagos is the most expensive, coming in at $6,540, and you will not get a discount from a Tudor dealer, by the way. The BB58 has crept up from $4,250 at launch all the way to $5,590. Inflation or price gouging, or a little bit of both? You tell me in the comments. The Ranger looks like a bit of a bargain in this company, relatively speaking, coming in at $4,460. So like I said, roughly $1,000 between each of them. Let's start by looking at the cheapest. Perhaps I should say lowest value piece rather than cheapest though. The Tudor Ranger got a bit of a slow clap on release, didn't it? Accompanied by a shrug of the shoulders. I think that's unfair. I think this is a really, really nice watch. This thing would be so easy to live with as a long-term choice, whether it's your main watch or your only watch. It's got that 70-hour power reserve, it's got a long warranty, the case it shares with the Black Bay 58 is really nice, it fits the average sized wrist beautifully. And if you think 39mm is too small for you, well, you might be right, I guess that's up to you, but because of the minimal bezel, this one is all dial. It looks larger than 39. I think it looks like the largest watch of the three today. Case finish is of course immaculate. all brushed like a proper sports watch, a proper tool watch, apart from a tiny high polish outer ring to the fixed bezel, which just gives the whole thing a bit of a lift. I know it's not an affordable watch, but the finish is perfect, and it's a lovely piece of sapphire. So much detail on that Tudor rose crown as well. The bracelet is a bit boring though, just a 3-link oyster style, but again all brushed, no polished, including the sides. Female end links for an even better fit, and Tudor's new T-fit clasp. I've said it before, I'll say it again, this to me is the new standard bearer of adjustable clasps. It's so much smaller and neater than a glide lock, but offers just as much flexibility. As you can see, Mr. P's has a few scratches on it already though. You don't get any fancy coatings for your 4460 Aussie dollars. And I think it's the first Tudor I have ever reviewed when I'm not complaining about excessive, superfluous dial text. It is refreshingly clean and simple, for a Tudor anyway. And no snowflake hands. Now that will be a plus for some but a minus for others, I'm sure, especially when the hour hand on the Ranger is often likened to something that I'll not mention, but I will merely allude to. It wears very sweetly. Of course, this is a reissue of an older Ranger model. Well, in truth, it's a reissue of a reissue. The original watches were either 34 or 36mm, then Tudor released a 41mm version. So although this 39mm model may not please the purists, this 79950 is at least closer to the original watches than the 79910 reissue was. I like this size a lot. Rolex seem to be getting bigger. It's nice to see Tudor getting smaller. But as discussed, this thing looks quite substantial. That fairly narrow bezel, large dial, clean simple numerals and batons, and lots of free space on the dial gives it plenty of volume, plenty of presence. Mini moans and niggles section? Well, it may be the cheapest watch here, but it's still not cheap, and you only get a printed dial and a slightly dull oyster bracelet. And I know that forced patina is not to everyone's taste either. Maybe this one would have found more friends when it was released had it been white on black rather than off-white on black, but I like it. I could totally live with one of these long term, very comfortably indeed. Moving on to a watch I have been living with long term very comfortably, it's the Black BB58. These have been supremely popular since they were launched in 2018. Used prices are still very strong, especially for this black and gilt colour version. The blue one, little bit easier to buy, a little bit cheaper, and no wonder it's a good looking watch that nails a lot of the retro reissue sweet spots. It's a great size, black and gold is always a winner, plus there is that touch of colour with the red triangle, and the lack of date not only keeps the dial symmetrical, but also means it's less of a pain to wear in rotation, as many people I'm sure do. And it's the same basic overall case that you saw on the Ranger, but with high polished sides. It will scratch more as a consequence, but this one hasn't done too badly. You get the same beautiful brushing to the upper lug surfaces and the same chamfer transitioning between those surfaces. All three watches today feature female end links, so not only are they smaller than average with compact lug to lugs, but they also have an end link advantage to help them wear well also. Now the supplied bracelet is a faux rivet, so not only do we have faux tina, but we have faux rivets as well. It's okay, although I admit I wear mine on an aftermarket Jubilee, not because there's anything terribly wrong with this one, I just prefer the look and feel of it on the Jubilee, plus I get to retain the original Tudor clasp. However, that clasp has no on-the-fly adjustment. They have not upgraded the BB58 with the T-fit as yet, which is a bit of a miss, especially in this company. Indices are applied, and the gold on black gives this watch a luxurious look that the other two today don't really have. It's definitely the most overtly retro of the three, but it's also probably the most expensive looking as a consequence. I like the snowflakes. They are such a signature of the brand. It seems almost a shame to own a Tudor without snowflake hands, if you see what I mean. And again, it wears very well, although you don't get the adjustability of the other two because it doesn't have the T-fit clasp, which is a shame. They are unlikely to offer them as a standalone item, but if they did, I would be the first in the queue, I promise you. I wear it loose, I wear it low though, and it isn't a problem because it's a smaller and lighter than average watch. Moans and niggles. Well, it is the most overtly retro of the bunch today. Black and gilt is very much in at the moment, but will it be in 10 years' time? And what does a watch that deliberately looks old when it's new look like when it's actually old? My head just exploded. Perhaps yours did too. Moving on then to by far the most modern looking of the three today. The Pelagos line is less than 10 years old and this 39mm is the newest of the bunch. Pure black on white, pure legibility, pure functionality, pure gorgeous, as they say in Glasgow, especially when that crisp white on black is paired with the dull grey that you only get from titanium. These are great looking watches. Tudor have wisely, I think, added one tiny splash of colour with the model name in red beneath the pinion. But look at how the hand stack seems to float because of the blacked out centre section against the black dial. That is always a good look and it rarely looks better than it does here. And then there's that radially brushed bezel insert for even more cool, adding just a touch of texture. And Tudor finished their titanium a little differently to anyone else I've seen make high quality watches from the material. They kind of deliberately rough brush it. It looks a bit raw, it looks organic, it looks great. And nice to see they still managed to put a bit of a chamfer, helping the watch flow from sides to upper lugs. The coin edge bezel is easy to grip and operate despite the titanium, and despite the titanium, the action is very good. The crown guards on Pelagos are also a thing of beauty. So sculpted, so well done, they come to that neat centre line bisecting the shield embossed crown. The bracelet in some ways is unremarkable. It's a 3-link oyster style in dull titanium. Solid links, solid female end link, screws holding it all together just like both of the other watches today. The clasp is what is remarkable here though. Not only does it have the adjustability of T-fit, but it also has one of the nicest integrated diver's extension you'll find on a watch, hence why this one is a little longer than the steel T-fit on the Ranger. This has been one of the nicest emerging trends of the last few years, the increasing frequency and increasing quality of on-the-fly adjustable clasps. They are just such a good idea that it's hard to go back to a watch these days where you're only dealing with micro-adjust holes. And one more quick look at the dial and hands before we get this bad boy on wrist. So clean, so simple, but it would definitely be more simple if it had less text on the dial. You saw how clean the Ranger looked with minimal text. The BB58 is somewhere in between. The Pelagos 39 has a few lines too many. I've always thought that Tudor would be better served by dumping Genève and officially certified, especially on these sub 40mm watches, to give a bit more free space on the dial. Mini moans and niggles, well, excessive dial verbiage has just been discussed, but I haven't talked about the lack of protective coating on the softer than steel titanium. Your £6.5 Tudor might end up looking a bit used a bit too quickly. And it's not exactly a warm looking watch. It's so stark you'll need to think about whether or not that suits your personal aesthetic and your personality. I know Mr. P very well. He's a no-nonsense guy. The Pelagos suits him to a T. On wrist, this one wears even better than the other two because it weighs approximately 30 grams less than the other two. Now, not everyone will agree with that statement because not everyone appreciates a lighter watch like what I do. I've definitely been getting into tie personally over the last couple of years, and this is the top of the titanium tree for me. Such a no-nonsense look because of the white on black colour scheme, so it flies under the radar in a way that the BB58 probably doesn't. Definitely the most legible of the group today as well. Any of the three would make great long-term companions. Perhaps this one would be the greatest of all because it's the most comfortable of all. And finally, let's bring them all back together again to discuss Lume. I don't think there are going to be any great surprises here. Ranger on the left, BB58 in the middle, Pelagos on the right. I hardly need to tell you that, I'm sure. And I'm sure you'd expect the two dive watches to do better than the sports watch and the dive watch without the Fotina to do better than the dive watch with the Fotina. Do you know what? You'd be dead right. No watch does horribly, but no watch does amazingly well either. I've included plenty of Tudors in Lume Wars episodes and they haven't exactly excelled considering the asking price. Overall, they get a must try harder for Lume. So where does that leave us then? Well, it's pretty much three great watches, take your pick. I did say there was a reason why I stacked them in this order, left to right. Ranger, then Black Bay, then Pelagos. And that's because I think there is a logical path between the three. There is a fair degree of overlap between the Ranger and the BB58 because they are both retro reissues, both stainless steel, both share the same case, and both have that deliberate forced vintage look. And there's a fair degree of overlap between the Black Bay 58 and the Pelagos, both 200-meter dive watches, obviously, and both having the extra utility, therefore, when compared to the Ranger. I think perhaps therefore if one could only have one of the three, then the one in the middle would tick the most boxes. But if one could have two, then the two on the ends make a very compelling pairing. Now I can only afford one and I'm perfectly happy with the one I chose. The 58 is a great all-rounder and I love the vintage looks. But Mr. P really does have a killer pairing on his hands. The retro, sporty simplicity of the Ranger on one hand, or should that be in one hand, and in the other hand the stark modern tooliness of the lightweight Pelagos. I can see why he went for the Pelagos in the first place. I can also see why he went for the Ranger when it was offered to him as well. So there you have it. No bad watches on the table today then, but it's a tough choice to be made if you have to decide between the three of them. The Ranger has a beautiful simplicity about it and it wears so nicely. The Pelagos is light but still so tooly and so purposeful, and the 58 is just dripping with retro goodness. Which one would you choose? I don't think there's a wrong answer, just three slightly different right answers. And did I pick the wrong watch? No, I'm perfectly happy with mine, but equally I could see myself with either of the other two long term. Thank you for making it all the way to the back end of the video. If you like this type of comparison with Tudors, click here or click here. I hope to see you all again in the future.